John Carter was a soldier, a human soldier, one of the few left who still believed in protecting the galaxy. He was tall, strong, and brave. He had fought in battles all over the galaxy, earning the respect of his comrades and the enemies he defeated. But today, he faced a different kind of challenge. It wasn't a battle with weapons or spaceships. It was a choice. The Galactic Alliance had just won a long war against an enemy that threatened to destroy everything they had worked for. The victory had cost many lives, and John had fought in the thick of it, as a reward for his bravery. In sacrifice, the Alliance was offering him something special. A prize, they said, for all the soldiers who had made it through the war. John had heard rumors about the reward. Some said it was a grand treasure, others a powerful weapon, but John wasn't interested in gold or weapons. What he wanted was something more meaningful. When the time came to make his choice, he stood before the high-ranking officials of the Galactic Alliance, ready to pick his prize. "Choose wisely, Soldier Carter," the leader of the Alliance, Commander Thorne, said with a serious voice. "May select anything you desire. The reward is yours." John looked around the room. He had already seen plenty of riches and weapons in his time. His thoughts turned to something else, a new beginning. Perhaps a fresh start on a peaceful planet, far away from the chaos of war. "I choose the reward promised to the soldiers who fought on the front lines," John said, his voice steady. The room went silent for a moment before Commander Thorne nodded. He motioned to an attendant who stepped forward and opened a large door. Through the door, a figure slowly walked in. She was an alien, a princess, as John had been told. He had expected someone majestic, someone beautiful, someone who looked like a leader of a powerful race. But when the alien woman stepped into the room, John was surprised. She wasn't what he expected at all. Her skin was a pale green, and her features were sharp, almost too sharp. Her hair, if it could be called that, was thin and silvery, hanging around her face like a mass of tangled threads. Her eyes were large and round with a strange glow to them. They weren't the sparkling eyes of someone who commanded the galaxy's respect. They were ... different. John couldn't help but notice that her body was small and fragile, not at all like the warrior princesses he had seen in the stories. She wasn't tall or muscular, and her movements seemed awkward. She was dressed in simple clothes, unlike the royal garb one might expect. "Meet Princess Zorina of the Alkari Empire," Commander Thorne announced with pride. "She is your reward. For your service to the galaxy." John's heart sank slightly. He had chosen her, but now he wasn't sure what he had gotten himself into. Zorina smiled at him, but it wasn't the smile of a confident leader. It was uncertain, almost as if she were embarrassed by something. "Princess Zorina," John said, bowing his head slightly. "Ow! It's an honor." "Thank you, Soldier Carter," she replied softly, her voice gentle. I hope I can serve you well." John didn't know what to say. She seemed kind enough. But there was a strange aura about her. As he looked closer, he began to realize that this wasn't just about her appearance. It was the way she carried herself. She wasn't confident, and she seemed lost. The room was still silent, and John could feel the eyes of the others on him. He knew what they were thinking. He probably thought he had made a mistake, choosing a princess who didn't look like the powerful figure they had imagined. But it wasn't about what she looked like on the outside, was it? It hurt enough. Stories to know that sometimes the real strength of someone came from the inside, not from how they looked. "I'll take her," John said, his voice firm. "She is my reward." There was a murmur of surprise from the officials, but they didn't object. Zorina smiled again, though it was still a little uncertain. She nodded and stepped forward, as if ready to follow him, though she didn't seem entirely sure of herself. "Thank you," she said again, looking up at him with those glowing eyes. I will try to be a good companion." John didn't know what to make of it all, but he didn't let it show. He turned toward the door, motioning for Zorina to follow. As they left the room, he noticed her walking a little slower, almost as if she were unsure of where to go next. They walked in silence down the corridors of the Alliance headquarters. And John couldn't help but think about what had just happened. He had chosen the princess, but was it the right choice? She didn't look like what he had imagined. She didn't have the grace or beauty of the women he had seen in the stories. But then, as they reached the docking bay where his ship was waiting, Zarina spoke up. "I may not look like what you expected," she said quietly, "but I will prove that I am worthy of your choice. I may not be what others think I should be, but I have my own strengths." John turned to her, surprised by the sudden honesty in her voice. She wasn't what he had expected, but there was something about her that made him want to give her a chance. He nodded, feeling a little more at ease. "Let's see what happens," he said, offering her a small smile. Together, they boarded the ship. The journey home would be long, and John didn't know what awaited them. But one thing was certain. The adventure was just beginning, and maybe, just maybe, there was more to Princess Zarina than met the eye. The trip back to Earth felt longer than it should have. The spaceship hummed quietly, its engines running smoothly as it traveled through the empty expanse of space. John sat in the cockpit, watching the stars pass by in a blur of light. Silence was peaceful, but it also felt strange. Zarina sat across from him, quietly observing the stars through the small window beside her. John couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had followed him since he chose her. She wasn't what he expected. She didn't have the beauty or the grace he imagined a princess would have. But there was something about her that he couldn't quite place. Her eyes were large and deep, almost glowing in the dim light of the ship. Every time he looked at her, he felt like there was more to her than just her appearance. He was beginning to wonder if he had made the right choice, but he wasn't about to go back on it now. Zarina remained quiet, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked calm, but John could sense that she wasn't completely at ease. She seemed out of place, unsure of how to act, as though she didn't belong in the human world. "How are you holding up?" John asked, breaking the silence. His voice was gentle, trying to sound reassuring. Zarina glanced up at him, a small, unsure smile on her face. "I am fine, Soldier Carter. Thank you for asking." Her voice was soft, and there was a hint of hesitation in it, like she wasn't entirely confident in how to respond. "I am just not used to traveling with humans." John nodded, trying to understand. "I guess it's strange being around us." "Huh." Zarina nodded slowly. "Yes, in my world, humans are seen as different. Many of my people do not understand your kind. They see you as weak, insignificant. But I've always believed that there is more to every species than what meets the eye." John was surprised by her words. He had never heard such things about humans. In his experience, humans were known for their strength, their courage, and their ability to adapt in ways that other species couldn't. It was something he was proud of. But he had never realized how other species viewed them. "Why do you think that?" he asked, genuinely curious. Zarina looked out the window, her gaze distant. "Because I have seen what humans are capable of. You fight for what you believe in, even when the odds are against you. Your strength is not just physical, it's something deeper, something that comes from within." She turned her gaze back to him, her eyes locking with his. "That is why I believe you made the right choice in choosing me." John was taken aback. He had expected her to say something about her people's tradition or her royal duties, but she spoke of something far deeper. She wasn't just some princess waiting to be rescued. There was wisdom in her words, and it made John feel like he was the one who had a lot to learn. "Thanks," he said, a bit unsure of how to respond. "I wasn't expecting that." Zarina smiled. Again, but this time it was different. It wasn't uncertain or shy. It was genuine, and it made her seem more real. As the journey continued, John and Zarina talked more. Slowly, they began to understand each other better. Zarina shared stories of her home planet Alkari, a world where beauty was seen differently. Her people, though physically strong and capable, had a unique culture where appearance was not as important as strength of character. She explained that her people had always been underestimated by others, but they didn't care. They'd learned to value their inner power instead of their outward appearance. "On Alkari," Zarina explained, "the most powerful leaders are not those who are admired for their beauty or strength alone, but those who lead with wisdom, compassion, and strength of will. My people have always believed that true beauty lies within." John listened intently. The more Zarina spoke, the more he realized how little he truly knew about her world. It wasn't just about how she looked, it was about everything she had learned and experienced. Her story was one of survival and strength, not just physical, but emotional and mental. As the ship drifted closer to Earth, John's thoughts turned to what awaited them back home. He had been a soldier for most of his life, and now he was returning home with a princess from a distant planet as his companion. He couldn't help but wonder what people would think of her. Would they see her as an outsider? Would they treat her as something different because of her appearance? "Do you think they'll treat you differently on Earth?" John asked, his voice quiet. Zarina sighed softly. "I'm not sure. My people are not known to other species, and those who do know us often misunderstand us. I fear that I may not fit in, that they may not accept me." John felt a pang of sympathy for her. He knew what it was like to feel like an outsider. He had fought for years to prove himself, to show that humans weren't weak or insignificant. Zarina's struggle was different. She wasn't just trying to prove her strength. She was trying to prove that her worth was not tied to how she looked or what others expected her to be. "You don't have to worry about fitting in with anyone," John said, his tone firm. "Dear, with me now, and I'll make sure no one treats you differently. We may not know each other well yet, but I can promise you this. I won't let anyone make you feel less than you are." Zarina's eyes softened, and she gave him a small, grateful smile. "Thank you, John." The words hung in the air between them, and for a moment, the quiet hum of the ship was all they could hear. John knew that their journey was far from over. He had made a choice to take on something he never expected, but as the days passed, he realized that there was more to Zarina than just her appearance. She was strong in ways he hadn't yet fully understood, and he was beginning to see the truth in her words. There was more to beauty than what the eye could see. Their journey back to Earth was just the beginning. There was much more to discover about each other and about themselves. The journey was taking longer than John expected, but it gave him plenty of time to think about Zarina. She had started to reveal bits and pieces of her world, her thoughts and her experiences, but there was still so much he didn't understand. Her quiet nature, her deep wisdom, and the strength hidden behind her eyes all made John feel like there was more to her than met the eye. But he didn't know what that was, and he felt both curious and cautious about it. One night, as the stars twinkled brightly outside the ship's window, Zarina asked if she could join John in the cockpit. She had been spending most of her time in the observation room, staring out into the endless space. John didn't see a problem with it, so he nodded and stood up to make room for her. The moment she stepped in, her presence felt different. It was as if the weight of her true self was starting to reveal itself. "Are you okay?" John asked, looking over at her. Zarina had been unusually quiet today, and he could tell something was weighing on her. Zarina took a deep breath, her eyes locked on the stars. "I have been hiding something from you," she said softly, her voice filled with hesitation. "Something that I've never shared with anyone before." John raised an eyebrow, surprised by her sudden shift in tone. He had gotten used to her quiet, somewhat distant manner, but now there was a sense of urgency in her words. "What is it?" he asked, keeping his voice calm. He knew she was struggling with something, but he didn't know what. Zarina hesitated for a moment before she spoke again. "I am not like other princesses, not just because of my appearance, but because of who I really am. I am the heir to the throne of the Alkari Empire, yes. But there is something else, something my people have kept hidden for generations. It's a power I was born with, a power that my people have never revealed to outsiders." John's curiosity grew, but he didn't interrupt her. He wanted to understand what she was talking about. "I was born with the ability to manipulate energy," she continued, her voice low and serious. "My people have always kept this secret. Rest of the galaxy. See, my race is not just physically strong. We have the ability to harness and control the energy of the universe itself." John listened carefully, trying to make sense of her words. He had heard rumors about powerful species that could manipulate energy, but he never thought he would meet someone who could do it. "Why didn't you tell me before?" John asked, his mind racing. "Why keep something like that hidden?" Zarina looked down, her gaze softening. because I didn't want you to fear me. I didn't want you to see me as just a weapon or something dangerous. I wanted you to see me for who I am, not for my powers. John's heart softened as he realized how much courage it must have taken for her to reveal something so important. She had been hiding a part of herself that could make her both feared and revered. "Why now?" John asked gently. "Why tell?" "Me now?" Zarina met his eyes, her expression serious. "Because I can't hide it any longer. We're getting closer to Earth, and when we arrive, I fear that someone may try to use me to exploit my power for their own gain. I need you to understand, John. I can't control the way others will see me, but I can trust you. I believe you'll understand that I am more than just my appearance or my abilities." John was quiet for a moment, processing everything she had just said. He had no idea that this was the burden she had been carrying. All this time, he had been focused on her appearance, her awkwardness, and her strange behavior. But now, hearing about her true power, he realized how wrong he had been to judge her. "You're not just a princess," John said, his voice filled with awe. "You're a warrior, and not just with weapons. You've been carrying this secret, this power all on your own, and yet you still manage to be kind and wise. That takes strength." Zarina smiled faintly, but her eyes still held a sense of uncertainty. "I never wanted this power, John. It's not something I asked for. My people, they fear me because of it. I fear myself because of it." John could see the inner conflict in her eyes. She had the potential to be a force of nature, yet she was hesitant to embrace that power fully. It was clear to him now that her journey wasn't just about learning to live among humans or serving as a reward. It was about accepting who she was and learning to control the power she had been given. "You don't have to fear it, Zarina," John said softly. "We all have something inside us that we fear. But we can choose to control it, to make it work for us instead of against us. If you can trust me, I'll help you. We can figure this out together." Zarina looked at him, her eyes searching, his face for any sign of insincerity. But all she saw was honesty. John meant every word. I don't know if I'm ready," she whispered, looking down at her hands. "I don't know if I can control it." John placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You're not alone, Zarina. I'm with you, and together we'll figure it out." There was a long silence as Zarina processed his words. She didn't speak for a while, but John could see that she was beginning to let go of some of her fear. It was a small step, but it was a step in the right direction. Finally, Zarina nodded slowly. "Thank you, John. I trust you." John gave her a small smile, a sense of relief washing over him. He had no idea what the future held for them, but one thing was certain: he would never judge her for what she was. He had chosen her as his reward, but now he realized that she had so much more to offer than he could have ever imagined. As the ship sailed through the stars, John and Zarina sat in silence, both of them contemplating the journey ahead. It wasn't just a journey to Earth, it was a journey of self-discovery, of understanding, and of learning to trust each other completely. The days passed quietly as the ship made its way toward Earth. John and Zarina spent their time getting to know each other better, sharing stories of their pasts, and learning about each other's worlds. The more John learned about Zarina, the more he found himself admiring her strength, her courage, and her wisdom. He had expected her to be just another princess, someone to sit beside him and be admired. But what he found was something far more complex and inspiring. Zarina for her part began to open up more. The more she spoke, the more John realized how much she had been hiding behind her quiet demeanor. She had faced challenges in her life that few could understand, growing up with powers that frightened her people, feeling isolated because of her appearance, and constantly being judged for things beyond her control. Yet despite all of this, she remained kind, thoughtful, and determined to do what was right. One evening, as they sat together in the ship's lounge, Zarina spoke about her childhood on Alkari, the planet she had left behind. Her voice was soft, but there was a strength to it that made John listen intently. "As a child," Zarina began, "I was always different from the other children. We would play together, laughing and running, while I was left alone, studying my powers. My parents didn't know how to teach me how to control them. They were afraid of what I could become, of the destruction I could cause if I lost control. So, I spent most of my days alone, learning how to keep my power hidden, how to fit in with the others. John could see the pain in her eyes as she spoke, and he felt a deep sense of sympathy. He couldn't imagine what it must have been like for her, to grow up feeling isolated and afraid of her own strength. It wasn't until I was older that I understood the true nature of my power, Zorina continued. It wasn't just about controlling energy. It was about understanding the balance between power and peace. My people never taught me that. They feared me, and because of that I feared myself. John placed a hand on hers, giving it a reassuring squeeze. You're not alone anymore, Zorina. Zorina, I'm here, and I'll help you figure this out. You don't have to fear your power. You just need to learn how to use it for good. Zorina looked at him, her eyes softening. You really believe that, don't you? John nodded. I've seen what you're capable of. You're not just powerful, you're wise, and that's something people don't always recognize. It's not just about strength, but how you use it. Zorina smiled, and for the first time since they met, John saw a genuine sense of relief in her expression. It was like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She had spent so long hiding her true self, and now, for the first time, she felt like someone understood. I think I'm starting to believe that too, she said softly. As the days continued, their bond grew stronger. John began to see Zorina not just as a princess, but as an equal partner. They worked together to prepare for their arrival on Earth, discussing the challenges they would face and how they would navigate the complex world that awaited them. John, who had once seen her as a reward, now saw her as someone who had the potential to change the galaxy. But despite their growing connection, there were moments when Zorina seemed distant. John noticed that she would often stare out of the window, lost in thought, as though something was weighing on her mind. He didn't press her, knowing that some things took time to work through. But he couldn't help but feel that she was holding something back, something important. One night, after they had finished their dinner, Zorina stood up and walked toward the observation deck. John followed her, sensing that something was on her mind. Zorina, he called softly, approaching. She turned to face him, her expression troubled. John, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can fit in on Earth with your people. I've spent so long hiding from others, trying to be someone I'm not, that I'm not sure who I am anymore. And I don't want to disappoint you. John stepped closer, gently lifting her chin, so their eyes met. You don't have to be anyone but yourself, Zorina. Earth may be different from what you're used to, but that doesn't mean you won't fit in. You just have to be true to who you are. Zorina shook her head. I don't know if I'm ready for that. I've spent so much time hiding my true self. I don't know if I can be open with everyone, especially with people who might not understand me. John took a deep breath, searching for the right words. I get it. It's scary to open up, to be vulnerable. But I've learned something from you, Zorina. You don't have to be afraid of your power or your past or what others think. You're strong because of everything you've been through. You've learned how to survive, how to grow, and that's what makes you beautiful, inside and out. Zorina looked at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. But what if I fail? What if I can't handle it? Won't fail, John said firmly. And even if you stumble, I'll be there to help you. We'll figure it out together. Zorina stood still for a moment, her thoughts racing. Finally, she nodded slowly, a small, hopeful smile tugging at the corners of her lips. Thank you, John. I think I'm starting to believe that. John smiled back, feeling a sense of warmth spread through him. He had come a long way since that day he chose Zorina as his reward. He had never expected to find such strength and beauty in someone so different from himself. But now he realized that was exactly what made her so special. She wasn't just a princess. She was a person with dreams, fears, and strengths of her own. As the ship continued its journey toward Earth, John knew that their adventure was far from over. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, but one thing was certain. Zorina had already proven that she was more than just a reward. She was a partner, a friend, and someone who could change the galaxy. The journey to Earth was nearing its end, and John and Zorina had grown even closer. Their bond had strengthened. and they had begun to trust each other in ways that went beyond the simple roles they had originally been assigned. Zarina had opened up more about her past, and John had shared stories of his experiences as a soldier. Despite the quiet moments of doubt and uncertainty that had filled their days, they both felt a sense of peace in knowing that they were no longer alone in their struggles. However, peace is often short-lived, especially in the galaxy they lived in. One morning, as the stars stretched out in endless blackness outside their ship, a loud alert sounded, breaking the calm atmosphere. John sat up quickly, his heart racing as he rushed to the control panel. Zarina, who had been sitting quietly near the observation window, immediately stood up, sensing the sudden change in the air. "What's happening?" Zarina asked, her voice sharp with concern. John worked quickly, his fingers flying over the controls. "We've picked up a transmission from an unknown source. The message is marked as urgent. I'm running a scan to identify it." Zarina stepped closer to him, her expression tense. "Who could be sending us a message?" John didn't answer. The scan took only a few seconds, but to him, it felt like an eternity. When the results came back, his face hardened with realization. "It's a distress signal from your planet Alkari." Zarina's eyes widened with shock. "What? My planet? But how?" Before she could finish, another transmission cut through. The silence. This time, it was loud and clear, a voice filled with panic and urgency. "This is Captain Villar of the Alkari Defense Fleet. We are under attack. The Empire is under siege by a force we cannot identify. They are too strong, too powerful. Please, we need help." Zarina's heart sank. Her eyes locked with John's, and for the first time, John saw the fear in her eyes. "My people are in danger," she whispered. "We have to go back. I have to go back." John placed a hand on her shoulder, trying to steady her. "We're not far from Earth. You'll be safe there. Let's report this to the Galactic Alliance. They'll send help." Zarina shook her head. "No, the Alliance won't make it in time. If I don't go now, my people will fall." John knew that she was right. Her people were in danger, and if they didn't act quickly, they would be lost. He didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed the controls and punched in the coordinates. "For Alkari." "We're going to help them, Zarina," he said, his voice firm. "Let's move." As the ship accelerated toward her planet, the tension in the cockpit grew. Zarina's hands trembled slightly as she watched the stars streak by. John could see the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. This was her people, her home, and the threat they faced was real. She wasn't just a princess anymore. She was their last hope. "Tell me everything you know," John said, as he piloted the ship. "I need to understand what we're up against." Zarina took a deep breath, her voice steady, despite the fear in her heart. "The enemy we're facing is unlike any force we've encountered. They don't belong to any known species in the galaxy. They appeared suddenly, without warning, and their ships are unlike anything we've ever seen. They can disable our weapons with a single blast. Their leader is a ruthless warrior, known only as the Warlord. He seeks to conquer the galaxy. Alkari is his first target." John clenched his jaw. "So they've been planning this for a while." Zarina nodded. "Yes, the Warlord knows about my abilities. He wants to use me as a weapon to bend my power to his will. But he doesn't understand what my people and I have learned over the centuries. We won't be controlled." As she spoke, John could see the fire in her eyes. This wasn't just about protecting her people, it was about standing up to someone who had underestimated her. Zarina had spent years hiding her true power, but now it seemed that she was ready to embrace it fully as they neared the orbit of Alkari. The image of the planet appeared on the ship's screen. The once beautiful world was now scarred by battle. Smoke rose from the surface, and several of the defense fleets had already been disabled, floating aimlessly in space. Zarina's eyes filled with emotion, but her face remained calm. "This is it," she said softly. "We need to land and join the fight." John set the ship into a steep descent, and soon they were on the surface, just outside the capital city. The air was thick with the scent of burning debris, and the once thriving city now lay in ruins. Zarina stepped off the ship, her posture straight and proud, despite the fear she must have been feeling. "Stay close," John ordered, his hand on his weapon as he followed her. We don't know what we're walking into. The two of them made their way to the command center, where the remnants of Valkyrie's defense forces were trying to regroup. The commanders were frantic, giving orders and trying to make sense of the chaos. Princess Zarina. One of the commanders called out as he spotted her. We didn't expect you to return so soon. We thought you were? We don't have time for pleasantries, Zarina interrupted. Where is the enemy? The commander pointed to a holographic map. They've taken the western stronghold and are advancing toward the capital. We've tried everything, but they're too powerful. We can't hold them off much longer. Zarina nodded, her face set with determination. I can help, but I need to know where they are. With quick precision, the commander relayed the information. Zarina's eyes flashed with a mixture of fear and resolve as she prepared for what she knew she had to do. She wasn't just a princess anymore, she was a warrior, and her people were counting on her. John, she said, turning to him. We fight together, or we lose everything. John nodded, his eyes locked on hers. We'll win, Zarina. Let's show them what humans in Valkyrie can do when we fight together. As they moved toward the battlefield, John couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. This was more than just a battle. It was a test of everything they had fought for. The stakes had never been higher. The battlefield was chaos. The air was thick with the sounds of explosions and distant gunfire as John and Zarina pushed forward, side by side. Their journey had brought them to this moment, and now they stood together, ready to face the enemy that threatened to destroy everything they had worked for. Zarina's eyes glowed with a fierce determination as she surveyed the battlefield. Her people, the Valkyrie, were strong, but the enemy they faced was like nothing they had ever encountered. The warlord and his forces were merciless, and every move they made seemed calculated to bring about their destruction. Yet Zarina wasn't afraid. She had spent too long hiding her true self. But now she was ready to embrace her power, to fight for her people and her home. John stood by her, his grip firm on his weapon. He had always been a soldier, trained to fight in the toughest of conditions. But this was different. This wasn't just about winning a battle. It was about protecting someone he had come to care for deeply. It was about standing beside Zarina, not as a reward or a duty, but as a true partner in the fight for the future of the galaxy. We need to get to the command center, Zarina said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them.
I guess. If we
can take down their leader, the rest of the army will fall. But we can't do it alone. John nodded. We've got this. We'll do it together. The two of them fought their way through the battlefield, Zarina's power crackling with energy as she unleashed waves of force at the advancing enemy. John moved beside her, using his training to protect her and keep the enemy at bay. The bond between them had grown stronger with each passing day, and now it was clear that they were a team, a force that couldn't be easily stopped. As they reached the command center, Zarina's mind raced. She could feel the presence of the warlord. Nearby, his energy dark and oppressive. He had been expecting her, knowing that she was the key to his conquest. But he didn't understand the true strength. He didn't understand that she wasn't just a weapon to be controlled. Zarina, John said, his voice tight with urgency. We're almost there. Stay focused. Zarina took a deep breath, pushing aside the fear that had crept into her heart. She was ready. She had spent so long hiding from her power, but now she would embrace it fully. She would no longer be afraid of what she could do. As they entered the command center, they were met with resistance. The warlord's soldiers stood in their way, but Zarina's power surged forward, knocking them aside with ease. John moved beside her, taking out the remaining guards with precision. They were unstoppable, united, strong, and determined. The warlord stood at the far end of the room, watching them with cold eyes. He was tall, his armor gleaming in the dim light. His presence was overwhelming, like a dark shadow that threatened to swallow everything in its path. So you've come, the warlord said, his voice low and menacing. I knew you would eventually reveal yourself, Zarina. You can't hide your power forever, and now it's mine for the taking. Zarina stepped forward, her eyes locked on his. You don't understand, warlord. I will never let you control Me, you can't bend me to your will. The warlord laughed, a sound that sent chills down John's spine. You're nothing but a tool to be used, just like your people. You will never escape your destiny. Zorina's hands clenched into fists as her power surged once again. My destiny is mine to choose, and I choose to protect my people. I choose to stop you. The battle between them was unlike anything John had ever seen. The warlord's power was immense, but Zorina's energy was pure and unyielding. She was no longer the princess who hid her strengths. She was a warrior, a protector, and a force to be reckoned with. John fought alongside her, taking down the warlord's soldiers and keeping their attention focused on him while Zorina faced the warlord himself. The room shook as their powers collided, and John could feel the intensity of the battle in his bones. But he knew they couldn't afford to lose.
What now?
Zorina's energy grew stronger, fueled by her determination and the love she had for her people. The warlord's power began to falter, his confidence wavering. He had underestimated her, just as so many others had done before. You think you've won? The warlord spat, his voice filled with rage. You're nothing. We'll destroy you. Zorina's eyes glowed brighter than ever as she raised her hands, her power crackling with intensity. You're wrong. I am not just a weapon. I am Zorina of the Alkari, and I will protect my people. With a final surge of energy, Zorina released a blast of power that sent the warlord crashing to the ground. His army, witnessing their leader's defeat, faltered. The tide of battle had turned, and the enemy's forces began to retreat. John stood beside Zorina, watching as the warlord's soldiers fled. The battle was won, but they both knew that it had only been the beginning. Zorina's power had been revealed to the galaxy, and the consequences of that would unfold in time. Zorina turned to John, her face filled with exhaustion, but also with a sense of relief. We did it, she said softly. We stopped him. John nodded, his gaze filled with pride. Together, we did. As the smoke cleared and the sounds of battle faded, Zorina looked out at the wreckage of her city. It was not the peaceful world it once was, but it would rebuild. Her people would rebuild, and she would be there leading them into a new era, one where her power was no longer something to fear, but something to be embraced. Zorina turned back to John, her expression thoughtful. Thank you, John, for believing in me, for standing by my side. John smiled, his heart swelling with pride. I'll always stand by you, Zorina, no matter what happens. They stood together in the ruins of the command center, the weight of their victory settling in. It was a new beginning, not just for Zorina and her people, but for both of them. They had faced the darkness together and emerged victorious, stronger than ever before. And as the sun began to rise over the war-torn landscape, they knew that the future held more challenges, but they would face them, side by side, ready for whatever came next.